Reading FC laboured to a 0-0 draw with Luton before being beaten 2-1 at home to Preston this week. Two results that left Reading fans wondering exactly where this team is going and what's going to be coming up next for the Royals. Are we going to see a bounce back towards some sort of potential romantic playoff future, or are the Royals now heading towards what many thought they were expecting to see this season, and that is perhaps at best a mid-table finish? Welcome to the Tilehurst podcast, episode 315. I'm your host, Marc, Mayo. As per usual, joining me this week is the view from the Dolan, or I guess the view from his sofa for the first half of the week, and then the Dolan for Friday night. Ben Thomas, how's it going, mate?
Yeah, all right. It's been an interesting week on the pitch, really. So, kind of eager to get into it and chew the fat, as it were.
Yeah, definitely. We'll be having a chat about a couple of games this week, as well as your questions in the mailbag, as per usual. The Newsbites will have a little bit later on, update you on what's been going on around the club. And big match preview, we'll be looking at Watford, which is another televised game. I didn't have in a lot of these at the moment. But certainly the Boxing Day game's even been put back for that. So lots to look forward to as we go into what is actually going to be the last week before the World Cup break, which isn't quite as long for Reading. We'll be talking about that a bit later on, though. So let's first go into the recap. As always, a big thank you to our sponsors, ZCZ Films, and our Patreon subscribers. So let's go and talk about Luton 0, Reading 0, and Reading 1, Preston 2.
Come rain or shine, it's time to relive the latest match action with the recap.
This podcast is sponsored by ZCZ Films, Reading's oldest ultras.
Well, we may as well tackle these games together because there's quite a lot of similarities that Reading portrayed this week, shall we say. The Luton game, as I say, 0-0, and actually Reading probably the better team for a lot of this game, but just didn't have the accuracy to kind of make things happen. Andy Cowell and Yaku Mate up front, as they stayed for the Preston game when Ched Evans, with those two second-half goals either side of a Lucas Shaw penalty, sunk Reading. And really the problems that I felt, I'd probably say that Preston perhaps a little better than Luton. I know Luton fans didn't think they played particularly well for them, but certainly that was a missed chance. And then the Preston game as well, missed opportunity to take at least a point. But Reading's approach to these games, and to the Preston game in particular, just kind of left to quite a lot to be desired, I think, in terms of actually forming kind of proper attacks. Obviously, anyone can hoof the ball forward and everything, and it's an Andy Cowell, Yaku Mate strike partnership for both games that inevitably going long and hitting direct balls is going to work to some extent. But I actually felt like the approach that Reading had in these games just didn't really work. Even if you are going to go long to Andy Cowell, you should be able to make that work, but it just didn't, did it?
No, not in either game, really. I mean, I think the frustration that is, I say boiling over, but that's not, it's a bit dramatic, really. But the frustration with the two results is that we haven't looked, likely to get any sort of coherency up front. And I think, given the injuries that we've had, this season, we're blessed with almost an abundance of options up front. And when it doesn't work, rightly or wrongly, the fan base get frustrated because there's options there. I think really the biggest takeaway from the Preston game, if we kind of start and then go back to Luton, is that, for me, I don't understand why there wasn't changes up front. Having Carroll as a focal point for our attack in both games just seemed a bit strange to me, really. I like him as a player. I think a lot of his attributes are quite underrated in terms of, people just assume he's big and we revert to type and go long, which is effectively what we've been doing for the last two games, certainly. But it doesn't work in the current balance and the blend that we've got in the team, because particularly on Friday night, the forward players weren't getting down the wings kind of quick enough and getting what I'd class as sensible crosses in. But then it wasn't being played to feet to him either. So he's kind of, ploughing a lonely furrow up front. And it's very, very difficult to, in some respects, defend the team selection for the attacking, the attacking area that we had against Preston. So I guess, I can understand the frustration. And from Zhao's point of view, I know it was a penalty, but it was probably good when he came on that he did score himself, just to kind of try and get a little bit of confidence back. It's it was very, very turgid at times on Friday night. Luton, not so bad. We get a point out of it. Defensively, we were quite good, but we were very, very wasteful up front. And you have to wonder whether having Shane Long kind of more involved on Tuesday would have yielded, a maximum return of points. And certainly having him against a Preston side that were quite happy to kind of absorb the pressure really on Friday night. So it was very, very frustrating watching both games. Obviously, we'll take a point all day long, but the Preston game, whatever your ambitions for the club are this season, that's a game that we really should be winning to really kind of get points on the board. It was all very, very stale and as I said, very turgid and very, very slow in the transitions, and there was no real attacking purpose, throughout the game. Changed slightly a little bit with the triple sub, but again, the argument could be, why was that not done at half time? Because it clearly wasn't working after the first 45, so why give it another 10 minutes to see if it's going to click when quite clearly it wasn't. So, all in all, a fairly frustrating week, really, on the pitch. And at the moment, without saying David McGlynn, you have to wonder where the points are going to come from next in terms of the win. We've got two fairly tricky away games in the next week before we break for the World Cup. So it's very difficult. The league is very, very tight as it is. And, we're 5 points off the playoffs and 6 points off the relegation zone. So that kind of tells you where we're at and ultimately probably where we will stay this season. But, there's no doubt that the form's dropped off and certainly the performances that Ince always wants have definitely dropped off as well. So, I would expect changes over the next couple of games, certainly.
Yeah, the irony of that statistic on the playoffs is that if Preston hadn't scored their late winner, we'd be 2 points off the playoffs. So that was a bit of a swing there because Preston, obviously now that team in 6th, Reading 12th. And yeah, I mean, looking ahead, obviously, if Reading are nearer the relegation zone, only 3 points off the relegation zone, as the international break, whatever it's called, starts, then Reading will definitely be in a bit of bother. I think that, to take some of your points there, I think the problem was with the kind of attacking transitional phases. And I think it's a little bit of a problem of playing this 3-4-3, which I'm a big fan of, but it kind of collapses a little bit with Rahman on the left, because when you've got Yiadom as a right wing back, he will bring the ball forward quickly, he will be direct, he will transition really well. Hoylett, to a lesser extent for me, but still does a good job of it. Whereas with Rahman, I don't feel there is as much urgency. And also his end product, I mean, putting a cross in the box, I think it's probably a bit of an underrated skill in football these days. I mean, we'll remember the days of Beckham and all this sort of stuff and landing it on a sixpence. And it's not the sort of thing that every player can do. But to have the balls in that Rahman was putting in on Friday night, they were just awful. They were underhit, so there was no pace to them. There was kind of soft, curly things that went nowhere near their man. And they're too low, so they get cleared easily. If they're a bit higher, then it doesn't matter necessarily if they've got no pace on them, because the attacker can attack it, but they don't get anywhere near the back post or anything like that. And then just generally, even if they're low and soft, they can hit a man, and they don't. So this was a massive problem. Hoylett doesn't have a great end product on him. He can get in the box and do stuff, and he can dribble well, which we all know is good. And I suppose this is a problem as well for Tom Ince. Doesn't have a brilliant end product, although at this level I'm not going to say it's too bad. And then after that, you've got Loom, who can't pass, and Hendrick, who he gives a good performance kind of 3-4 out of 10 times, really. So that midfield feeding the strikers isn't good enough. And then what you then require, if that's not good enough, is the strikers to create themselves. Carroll can't do that. Mate, seldom. Long is more likely to kind of cause general disruption, kind of a guess like Carroll, although in a different way. And then obviously Zhao can create for himself. We know that. So what you end up having is a midfield that can't create an attack that can't create for itself. And I don't know what the solution is necessarily, other than, getting Yiadom out to right wing back requires new defenders to be fit. Obviously, Mbenge was dropped to the bench, probably rested, let's be fair. He probably did need a rest for the Preston game. But otherwise, Reading have built a team that is very solid in a lot of ways defensively. We can get onto the defence in a little bit. But going forward, I just don't think the personnel is really right to play this game of of putting balls in the box because none of our players really have any end product to deliver quality balls in.
No, I mean, there's two lines of thought. You either persist with Carroll and you completely change, not system to suit him, but you almost play kind of three up front with him down the middle and potentially Mate and Hoylett on either side, kind of trying to push out wide and getting those crosses in the box. Or you take him out completely and you push Long and potentially Zhao in there as a front two potentially, and give Tom Ince a bit more license behind him because, to be fair to him, Tom Ince was doing the job of about three people on Friday night because that central defensive kind of pivot, if you want to call it that, just wasn't working either. Hendrick looked very, very slow. He wasn't really making any runs particularly quickly. Like you said, Loon was not passing particularly well at all, if at all. He makes all the basic stuff look incredibly difficult. So it's whether or not you persist. For me, it's whether or not you persist with Carroll at the moment. And I'm not saying either yes or no, but there are options available. The other thing that I was baffled by is that, after the game, Paul Ince said that it's the same players that we're relying on. Well, that's just not true because, you look at the bench, you had sort of Long, Zhao, Forner, Guinness Walker, obviously, Ajaria, and any one of those players could have come in and done a job on Friday night, or rather aim to do a job. Of course they're going to be tired. They're playing, Saturday, Tuesday, Friday. It's just the way it is, just reality. You can't keep saying we're tired all the time because what message does that send to the players? If they put in a substandard performance, okay, it's because we're tired. Well, a lot of people are tired when they're doing their jobs, but there was an option there to mix it up. And I think that was the most frustrating thing about it. It just felt from the off very, very self-inflicted. And you could tell within 5 minutes that the tempo of the game wasn't going to be quick. Preston were quite happy, as I said earlier, to absorb the pressure. They were very, very slow to get back into a block, but when they did that fairly well, and they took the two chances they had. All credit to them for taking the 3 points to go ahead and then get back in front to get the 3 points. But there were options there available, and there are different things to try. And I just don't understand why we kind of pretty much played the same way against Luton and it didn't really work. So why do it again? Why not mix it up? It's the last home game before the World Cup. The few people that did turn up to the game wanted to see a performance and wanted to see a win send them off into the World Cup break, and it just didn't happen. And it was, it was not a good night all round, really. So I think he, as a manager, he's got to be very, very careful with getting that balance between not throwing the players under the bus, but also not defending substandard performances, because we've seen it this season. They are capable of much better, that group of players, than what they've been doing recently. And the only way I can describe it is just frustrating, because for me it was a missed opportunity on Friday night to get 3 points and to kind of move, back up the table. The reality is we've won 1 in 8 games now, and that's not great form at all. That's really, really concerning form. So, and with 2 away games this week, you can see us sort of going, 10 games with 1 win, and that's a dangerous place to be in heading into a break when people have got time to think, and people might get a bit trigger happy and things like that. So it's really, really important that there is at least some sort of reaction over the next 2 games. To try and get some sort of balance back into the team. They can then go away and kind of refocus and come back in December ready to try and at least get back up the league and at least win these home games, which is what we need.
Yeah, it's ironic that the home games have started becoming the problem now, because at the start of the season it was very much the other way round. And I think it's the narrow defeats to QPR and the Burnley and Swansea. It's annoying, it's disappointing, but fundamentally we don't expect to win every game at this football club. And the Luton draw, taken in isolation, I think there's a lot of merit to it. I just think it's in the combination of these 2 games that it's frustrating. We are still the 4th best team at home in the league, but that's because we won, was it 6 in the bounce to start with, or 5 on the bounce? So we're kind of on a little bit of a decline in the last 6 games. Yeah, last 4, lost 2, drawn 1, won 1. And it's the fact that the Sunderland, West Brom and now Preston games have all kind of just passed us by. They've not actually been games that we've played well in and come out thinking, oh, we're hard done by. Like I've mentioned the other ones, we've actually just been quite bad. The away form, more as a comparison, more recently, yeah, we've dropped a couple by now by one goal, but the performances have been generally a bit better. So it's a difficult one. I think for Paul Ince, I know what you're saying. I think for if you're going to play Carroll, I think you almost have to be a bit more basic and have two options on the wing, so that Rahman is the overlap of Vijaria, rather than Rahman getting down the left wing, not really having anyone around, or having someone like Yeardon pop up who's actually not meant, is a bit more of a centre back who's now exposed his defence in the process of being there. So yeah, it's unfortunate. Paul Ince also was saying about the fact that the players were getting it forward too quickly and it kind of sounded like they weren't carrying out his game plan. I mean, I'd like to see evidence of what game plan he was meant to be telling them to do, because at no point did they really do that. And I suppose the last thing I'd say for Preston is that we've spoken about the start. Obviously, Reading came out, but it kind of stale, didn't really do too much. After you get the equaliser, and I'm not going to talk too much about the penalty because it was less of a penalty than the one we got denied at Burnley the other day, although most penalties are less of a penalty than that. But after we got the equaliser, that is when, in these home games, that's when you have to go on and at least look like you're going to get the winner and everything. You've got 20 minutes after that. Those are the moments where good teams just go and, put the opposition under their thumb and get the chances. Whether you take the chances or not, it kind of falls down to individuals. But as a team, do you think Reading did enough for the, certainly for the time between the equaliser and the winner and after the winner? Do you think there was actually a kind of surge of momentum there that Reading kind of needed to pull off? Because I don't really think there was.
No, and this sums up the game. They weren't proactive enough to win the game. They got a little bit of luck with the penalty, as you said, converted it, brilliant. You're back in the game. You think, well, just even the next 10 minutes, just sit, just calm everything down. Don't give away another goal, and that's exactly what they do. And it's. Yeah, it is completely self-inflicted, and they haven't been proactive enough. And your point about these games passing us by is exactly right. That's exactly what it feels like. We're not a team that's expected to go away and roll over or rather kind of beat the teams we're playing. People accept that we're not good away, and that's the reality of the league and where we've been over the last sort of 2, 3, 4 seasons. But the home games and certainly the start of the season were looking a lot more promising than they had been in previous years, and I think that's the frustration. And with going all the way back to October with the West Brom home game, on the day West Brom were good. They were really good. I'd probably say they were better than Preston in some respects, and we lost the game, and that was that. But I felt irritated by that because that was another opportunity to get 3 points on the board. Same with Friday night. You can't keep having this situation where we have these kind of false dawns with these players, and the inconsistencies in performances is just incredibly frustrating because we know what they're capable of. This group, on their day, they're very, very good. Certainly no worse than anyone else in the league, and because it is so congested, there's not one team that you look at and go, wow, okay, we really got to worry about them. So they've dropped a fair few points at home recently, and that could well be crucial come the end of the season wherever we are. Whether that's just about avoiding relegation or pushing for the playoffs or what, I don't know. But it's so important that these home games are won, because you just away it's very, very difficult. So look, it's the last one that we've got. We're back there on the 10th of December, which is where we hope we'll have a few more players back and a few more options, and a little bit more fight in the team, really, because I didn't see that on Friday night, and it wasn't it wasn't a happy place to be, if I'm honest.
For sure. Right, let's hear from Paul Ince then, and then we'll go into Newsbites and hear from you guys on the Twitter sphere.
I looked at the game against Luton, and the biggest thing that stood out for me is people not going with their runners. And that was again today for the second goal. The ball goes into these guys back to play. We don't go over runners, and then we don't get in front of the ball to stop the shot. And it is every little mistake we're making, we're getting punished. But it's all about the detail, and you've got to do this little details right. And if you don't, and you think, oh, it's okay, then it's not. But it wasn't just that, though. It was just like, there was no probably cohesion to our play. No patterns. We did. I mean, down the right hand side, we got a bit of fun, a bit of joy. You thought Thomas was going to get the equaliser in the last minute. So that's. I'm not standing there saying that Preston were a better team, because they wasn't. We just looked lethargic, and I'm hoping going to put that down to the 3 games in 6 days.
For all the latest Reading news, analysis and opinion, visit the website at thetilehurstend.com.
Not really sure about my use of Twitter sphere then. I feel like that was a bit old. Although, maybe we'll have to start charging you to send in questions for Twitter. Maybe that's the future for our social engagement. Or certainly we found another use for the Patreon money, I'll tell you that. But anyway, let's get on to some of the questions. We start with Peter Martyr saying, do we think playing Andy Carroll up top makes the team play the long ball game too much? It really seems to be detrimental to the amount of possession we have. Should we not be mixing up more and play out from the back more? Hopefully we have kind of already answered your question, Peter, because I won't spend much more on the Carroll thing. But I suppose the question is, if we take Paul Ince at his word and they are playing it like too long, too quick, then the question is whether the players are looking up and thinking, oh my God, that's Andy Carroll, I must pump a long ball forward to him. And if that is what they're thinking, then obviously that needs to be quelled a little bit, doesn't it? So that would still be on the manager to get that right at the end of the day. Let's talk midfield then. Let's go for Sam Richards' question, who says, why, in your opinion, is Ince not giving Tyrese Forner more minutes? For me, he would be the first centre midfielder on the team sheet, which is a very valid question. I feel like with the Luton game, Ben, I thought, fair enough, maybe not the sort of game that he would be excelling in. I know he came off the bench and everything. And then for the Preston game, I thought this is exactly the sort of game. Preston are going to play a low block. They are going to be vulnerable to creative central players like Ajario and Forner. And only one of those, well, neither of them started. One of them came off the bench. And Forner, who is raw, but he's got talent. And I feel like he's a sort of player who you can put him on the pitch and you know whether he's on it within the first 20 minutes. And if you start him and he's not on it, that's fine, take him off. But if he comes off the bench for the last 10 minutes and Reading are 2-1 down everything, I don't think he's the sort of player who's going to wrestle something back as much. I think you've got to start him, let him breed into the game and then see whether he's at it or not. I don't understand the logic in not starting him and having Hendrick, who is a great guy from what I can tell, good person in the dressing room and everything, but probably should be taken out of the team every now and again.
We got to look at Hendrick's age as well, really, haven't you? That is the fundamental flaw with a lot of these players. Is they are getting older, and Hoylett, as much as I loved him, he looked very old on Friday night. He didn't look anywhere near the kind of the junior Hoylett that we've seen sort of in previous games this season. Forner is an interesting one because there's clearly something about him that Ince isn't completely sold on. He's in and around the squad. He comes on. He had sort of half an hour to run around and do whatever he does. I still don't really understand Forner or Loom, to be honest. Early part of the season they looked all right together. Loom kind of showed a little bit more creativity, pops up with a couple of goals or whatever, or one goal, can't remember off the top of my head. But it's, that is a kind of a piece of jigsaw that does need to be solved moving forward. And, Hendrick is not going to be one of those players that is going to go Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday. It's just not going to happen. But he seems very, very reticent to drop him for whatever reason. Or even, in some respects, take him off. So I don't know. I think the only person really can answer that is Paul Ince. But you're looking at it and thinking, well, there really can't be any justification for playing Hendrick and Loom together come Tuesday night. You would expect one of those, if not both of them, to be taken out of the team on Tuesday. Because again, if he doesn't do that, and I know as Reading fans we're always clamouring for the next thing, and when we get this player back, and it'll be different when this person plays and all the rest of it, like we've done for several years. But based on their current form and productivity, there is no way that both of those players can start together on Tuesday night. Absolutely no way. So, it probably seems sensible to chuck Forner in on the basis that he can't do any worse than those two currently. And I don't think that's being knee-jerk. That's just a kind of a gradual build up of poor performances, which led us to, Luton. We kind of saw flashes of it, but Friday night really, where neither of them were very good at all. So he needs to seriously consider, how he's going to make those three work, and whether or not Ajara comes into that mix as well, whether he kind of feels in that position and tries to play a bit more forward. I don't know. I really don't know. But it's. I suppose it's nice to have a few little options like this, but it doesn't help when he doesn't use them and he doesn't kind of utilise them to good effect when things aren't working. So I think the most interesting part of Tuesday will be the team sheet and how we're set up to play against them, really.
Well, it sounds like having quite a few options all of a sudden and not really knowing how to use them sounds like the debate we're having on the strikers. So, yeah, I think that the only reason I think that Ince isn't playing him is because Forner maybe doesn't do his hard work defensively, and maybe that just kind of bars him from playing regularly. And Ince does, or Tom Ince does, Hendrick does, and Loom does, and that's it. They're the ones because they make the defensive work rate. And I think that is something that Forner has to introduce to his game if he wants to make it at a Premier League level. Plays for a Premier League club at the end of the day. But yeah, that's where we're at with that one. I'm not sure that you necessarily will play against Watford. That's my problem. And right, let's go talk about defending them. Eddie Core saying, while we have seen success for using the low block, do we have the strength in defence to get away with it using it long term? This system requires defensive players to be on it, ruthlessly punishes lapses in concentration should we persist. And similarly, Paul Ince saying, how are we conceding so many goals from crosses, corners and set pieces? Why is Mayo not playing right wing and give Tom Ince the freedom to play centrally behind the striker / won the game? So the problem is with the defence then, for me, I mean, the second goal just really infuriated me on Friday night. I know it's probably lazy to think that players just dive in and win the ball, and that's not what I'm suggesting. But I know that Paul Ince was really furious with Tom McIntyre because I saw he was shouting at him on the touchline, basically, wasn't he, after the goal? And he alluded to it in his post-match press conferences when he says that players weren't getting in the blocks and stuff like that. And this is the thing about the second goal for me, is that it's not that Tom McIntyre has to slide tackle and win the ball. It's that he's got to be close enough to actually make a block if the shot comes off. It's a lot easier to do that the closer you are to the ball, shock horror. So it really, it's my biggest bugbear that I've always had with Liam Moore, was that he dropped off. McIntyre's always done it as well, which has wound me up. And he I think he's probably learned it from Moore, perhaps at least. So I agree with Eddie that the low block is something that Reading have to get right. The thing is, Yiadom is not our first choice centre back. He's our first choice right wing back, and he's not able to play there. And Benge's come in and has looked good, but he wasn't. I mean, as I said earlier, not too fussed for him being taken out every now and again. Needs to be rested, young player, etc., etc. Holmes, I have no problems with, really. Generally, I think he's been really good this season. McIntyre, I've just said about. So those are the three centre-backs we've had. Two of them aren't meant to be playing there, because you should have Sam Hutchinson, who I think he's started 10 games for Reading this year, and Reading have won 6. That's a really good win rate for any team, really. And then McIntyre should be playing because Sarr, and I know we haven't seen much of Naby Sarr this season, but fundamentally he should be first choice if he's fit. So I'm frustrated with the defence a lot, but I just know for a fact that this is the one area of the pitch where we have actually really struggled for personnel.
Yeah, well, the whole point is that, Hutch went off, 25, 26 minutes, something like that, if memory serves, against QPR. And since then, they've not looked great defensively. All right, they kept a clean sheet against Luton, but, Luton didn't offer much at all up front on Tuesday. So for me, it is, like you say, it's square pegs round hole stuff. It really is. And I don't know why he just doesn't bite the bullet for the next 2 games. If Hutchinson's not going to be available, just go, right, we'll just play flat back 4. Go Yiadom, Holmes, McIntyre, and then, Rahman or Guinness Walker at left back, and just leave it at that. The next question will be, where's the width in the side? Well, you can talk about that once you've got your defence set up and how that moves. But having the option of Hoylett, Mate, sort of, on the left and right or whatever, to kind of get forward and put some running in, gives other players a little bit more freedom to do things further up the pitch. It's it's very, very difficult at the moment because, Yiadom is not, as you said, is not a centre-back. And Benge did okay, but he's not going to give you, 26 games or whatever in a row to be able to consistently, perform at this level. And what we've lacked really is a little bit of leadership. I think, to his credit, Tom Holmes has stepped up and done the best he can. But, when you're having a sort of game that, and I don't want to get on his back because everyone's doing it on Friday and it's fashionable now and all the rest of it. But, McIntyre did not have a good game at all on Friday. Obviously, he was at fault for the second goal. You could argue, as long as you like, about the first goal, but again, it was a poor goal to concede from a defensive point of view. So I don't know why he just doesn't go, well, look, Tuesday night we're just going to go flat back 4, and then we'll play it this way until we've got Hutchinson back, because there's no one in that 3 that is like a natural leader. And I know that he rates Tom Holmes as a kind of a vice captain, and obviously he's been captain this season as well, but he still lacks that inexperience. And having Hutchinson in there, who is arguably or has arguably been for me one of our better players this season when he has played, helps him out massively, improves his game. He's done the best he can in his absence, Tom Holmes, but it's not defensively, it's not working, and that they're not really sure of their roles in that setup with Yiadom and Holmes and McIntyre. And it just didn't look right from the off. So. Yeah, it's another difficult one, and unfortunately, it's not like other areas of the pitch where they can confidently go, right, I'm going to put him in there and he's going to do that job really well. Everyone's talking about Naby Sarr. I honestly can't tell you anything about him because we've hardly seen him this season, and what I saw, I thought he was okay, but we need a bit more than okay at the moment, and at least with Sam Hutchinson, we know what we're going to get. And if you move to a back 4, it becomes a little bit easier for those players to at least stick to their tasks and get the defensive side of it set up and, get blocks in and get close to those players with a little bit of cover, really.
Yeah, I think that the final, I have hesitancy over the back 4 myself because we switched to a back 4 against Sunderland and just got picked off. That's my hesitancy, is that because McIntyre isn't as strong a centre-back as Holmes and Hutchinson, etc., the fact that there's 3 of them kind of covers that off to a large extent is what I'm kind of happy about the back 3 does. It just means that we've then, as we've spent the whole show saying, you've then got to balance your midfield to make sure that that's not too tilted one way or the other, which Reading haven't done. So we'll have to see for the defence. We've got 2 very kind of difficult away games, actually. I mean, Hull's home form is okay. 4 wins in 10. It's not actually good, really. So maybe that's not a difficult one, but Watford certainly will be. And I just have a little bit of hesitancy in saying, well, let's just go for it, because maybe we can go for it at Hull. Maybe that's the one to try for. But with Watford, let's face it, we're going to try and grind out a point or a 1-0 win like we have done everywhere else. Things aren't going to change for Watford, and nor do I necessarily think they should. It just maybe the strike force and such could be spruced up a little bit. Right, well, let's go into Newsbites then. You can always get in touch with the show with the Tilehurst End at gmail.com, as well as the Facebook and the Twitter. Let's have some Newsbites then and talk about what's been going on around the club this week.
You're listening to the Tilehurst End podcast by Reading fans for Reading fans.
Right, well, I'll reel off what's been going on for the other Reading FC teams, and then we can have just a quick chat on what's another matter that's been floated about recently. Reading FC women, unfortunately, after a great 2-1 win at home to Leicester last weekend, lost 3-0 to Man City this week. So that was still only 1 win on the board for them in the WSL. As we said before, going to be a tough season. Hopefully something we can talk next week a little bit more about, because obviously the WSL will continue while the men's game pauses at this level. The under-21s bounced back from a 3-0 defeat to Swansea with a 7-2 win at Ipswich, which was certainly a nice little Noel Hunt derby, I guess, in a way. But Femi Aziz with a hat-trick in the first half, and Yarko Holzman and Akande also on the score sheet for that one. So, not bad, that one. And Reading under-18s, they beat Millwall 1-0 in the 95th minute on the weekend as well. So they're doing that. That was the Millwall actually flying really high in the professional development league that they're in. So that was a good win for the under-18s. And great to see Aziz back in the under-21. So that's the other thing I wanted to talk about in Newsbites this week is people certainly after the Preston game had a few questions online about Club 1871 and its impact and everything, and maybe it's whether it's perhaps suffering from not being very new, or maybe whatever reasons people think it's not great, whether it's quiet or the people there are not acting in a great way and such. I mean, it's not something that I have some minor opinions on it. I always want things to be more atmospheric and louder, but then in this country, I don't think there's any team that can sustain 90 minutes of noise unless the team's doing brilliantly. Even the best atmospheres in the world have quiet points. And also, I mean, I'm not a fan of it's the jumping on the netting during the goal celebrations for about a yard, giving it the big one and then kind of sliding back in, that I'm not a fan of. But I don't know, what's your thoughts on this, Ben? It's had a bit of discussion after the Preston game, so I thought we'd broach it.
Yeah, it did. And I don't really know why, if I'm honest. It seems to be, that when we have a couple of bad results, people look to within the fan base to have a moan and a whinge about something that people have tried hard to, to be proactive and to change things and to move things forward. And I don't, unless you're coming up with a really good idea to completely rip it up and start again, going online and criticising, I just think is bizarre. I have no affiliations to Club 1871 at all. You never get me out of the Dolan, to be honest. I love it, obviously, over there. But I appreciate as a Reading Football Club fan what those guys have tried to do and what they are trying to do. I say guys, I don't know if they are all men. I'm just saying that as a figure of speech, really. But it seems very unfair that when things aren't going right on the pitch, that certain sections of the fan base get blamed for it, or there's problems or whatever. The whole running towards away fans is it's not something I would be doing. Might be an age thing. I don't know. I'm there to watch football and not concentrate on other people, to be honest. But you get it at every club. There will be a section of people that are nearest the away fans that spend their whole game looking at what the away fans are doing. And that obviously from a practical safety point of view, that causes problems for the stewards and the safety team at the club. The netting is of serious concern, because obviously someone gets on there and they fall down, they're in serious risk of hurting themselves without sounding really boring. So there's a fundamental element there of being safe. There are a core group of people that have set this up, that have tried and are trying really hard. And I don't think you can ever criticise people for doing that. It seems to me that they are open to suggestions, and they want suggestions, just like we do when we ask questions or improvements to what we're doing as at the Tilehurst end. Same with Star. We're always looking for people to come in and suggest things, and constructive criticism is what particularly Tilehurst end and Star thrive off. So I can't imagine that Club 1871 aren't any different, but it just seems bizarre and petty to me that people will attack them and other parts of the fan base, and you get accused of not making noise or making too much noise or singing the wrong songs or whatever. Like it just seems ridiculous to me, and I don't understand why people do it. And it frustrates me. And we had a season last year where the fan base was very, very divided for a number of reasons. I'd like to think that some of those things have moved on now, and it's not as divided as it was. But going after Club 1871 after we lose 2-1 to Preston is, for me, it's not the one. And I don't understand really where it came from on Friday night. I really don't.
Well, we'll go into big match preview now.
Be loud and be proud and back the boys and make some noise. Come on, you R's!
Shout out to this week's podcast sponsor, ZCZ Films, showing that age is no barrier to being a hula hoop.
So welcome back to the show then, and big match preview. Just as a final thought on the 1871 chat. I mean, fundamentally, it is a question of if you can, think of improvements and stuff. I'm sure they're definitely open to it and getting these things through. And I think that ideally, there's always more atmosphere and everything. And actually, there's been a lot of games this year where it's been a brilliant atmosphere and things. The atmosphere 9 times out of 10 emanates from stuff on the pitch, doesn't it? And you can say what you want about, it extends beyond the 1871. It's the best run club in the world, the best run, stadium, the best priced food and everything. Ultimately, if your team is crap or playing crap, then that kind of rules out 90% of the benefit of it, doesn't it? In reality. So let's talk about the final 2 games Reading will have before this World Cup break then. So we have Watford on Tuesday night. That is a 8:00 kickoff. It's on Sky Sports as well. And then on Saturday, the 12th of November, 3 p.m. classic kickoff, Hull City away. And then it's not till the 10th of December that Reading are back. We've got Coventry, Birmingham Friday night, and then we've got Boxing Day, or the 27th actually it is, Swansea after that. So Reading are back during the World Cup. It's after the group stage. So we've seen it already. I think that we've had it confirmed already that Yildirim and Rahman are part of the preliminary Ghana squad. Don't know if they're in the main one. I think it's the 10th, isn't it, as these things have to be confirmed by Junior Hoylett also. I believe those 3 are the only 3 in reality going. I don't really think Buzanis is part of the Australia team very often, but, happy to be proven wrong on that. So what it means is that in reality, probably Reading are going to have most of their players back for the return at least, unless Ghana or Canada happen to go far in Qatar. So Watford then, Tuesday night. I think this is, as I said earlier, Ben, one of those games where Reading are going to go set up, be perhaps a little bit predictable, perhaps set up as a low defensive block and everything, try and make things happen on the break, pretty much like Coventry did on the weekend, and they won 1-0 with 33% of possession. So I think Paul Ince will be watching that videotape feeling like he might have a couple of ideas how to make it work.
Yeah, I mean, Coventry scored pretty early in the second half, and was it 50 minutes or so, something like that. Yeah. So, they had a fair bit of time to kind of defend effectively. Look, as I said earlier, there's not one team that you look at in this league and go, wow, okay, got to be scared of them or got to be fearful of them or whatever. Maybe in the early part of the season that was the case, but everyone's beating everybody now, and the classic was yesterday with Sheffield United who'd been out of form and go and beat Burnley 5-2. So there's very little room for correct scoring, I guess, in terms of guesses and predictions. But from our point of view, in terms of Watford, that market value, they've probably got the most expensive squad in the Championship. They've got João Pedro, they've got Sarr. They got Keenan Davis, who I liked last season, who I still like. I think he's a good player. Ken Sema, players like this, and that really have individual quality. But for whatever reason, I guess because they've had more managers than I've had hot meals over the last couple of years, that they've not had that stability. Whether or not Bilic will see out the season, I don't know. I can't imagine he will, the way that they're going at the moment. But it hasn't clicked for them this season at all, and I don't think there's huge reasons for us to be fearful. That said, I don't see us picking up all 3 points, but a draw would be great considering the kind of form that we're in. So it's going to be an interesting one. It's on Sky, so we're going to perform pretty badly, as we often seem to do these days, but. Look, you're right. Having me said, I wanted to see this, I want to see that. I can't see he's going to make huge changes for Watford with the game being, 48 hours away. If there are other players to come back in the squad, Hutchinson maybe, or other players can step up to get back in there, then great. But otherwise, I don't see a huge shift in formation. It's more about the personnel for me, really. So look, it's going to be an interesting one. I think for these players they've just got to show a decent performance and a little bit, I say pride again, is that the right word? Not sure, but they've just got to be a little bit more proactive in the game for me, and hopefully we'll see that on Tuesday night.
Yeah, the last Reading suffered a 2-0 defeat at Watford last time they were there in April 2021, which I seem to remember is a bit of a playoff kind of decider-y sort of game, wasn't it? That Reading went into it and lost. Can you actually tell me, this is a bit of a pub quiz question, you tell me the last player of Reading's to score a winning goal at Vicarage Road for Reading. Obviously, it might have done it a different time, but for Reading, can you tell me the last player who scored a winner at Vicarage Road?
A wild guess. I'm going to go Noel Hunt.
It was Kasper's Gorks.
Was it really?
It was. Well, we won in January 2012, which was actually on TV as well. A famous game that I remember because it was the classic comeback Reading at that point with Kebe scoring an equaliser, then Le Fondre scoring in the 85th minute off the bench, as he did that season. And then, we had a 1-0 win January 2014, Kasper scoring in the 5th minute for Reading against a Watford team that included like a Hector Bellerin and Troy Deeney. So, that was. We've obviously had a few years they've obviously had a few years in the Premier League, so we've not played them huge amounts recently. But it's a team
was that the season they went up? Was that or that ridiculous game against Leicester? Was that 2014?
So they went up after beating us 4-1, which was a game which fans may remember was the game we played about 2 days before playing the FA Cup quarter-final replay, wasn't it? So
That's right. Yeah,
that was the game we played. Jure Travner, Jack Stacey. We could do a terrible podcast on trying to guess the starting 11 for this.
Yeah, that was a Steve Clark masterclass. That one, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was Jem Karachan actually scoring, I believe, his last ever goal for Reading as a complete consolation in that one. But Novakovic, Zach Knight started and played in that one. Some very interesting players played in that game. Yakubu and Simon Cox started up front straight out of 2009, that one. So we have a not particularly massive record against Watford of late, and they're obviously a bit topsy-turvy, but I think this is, Reading are just going to go and sit in, really, aren't they? It's unfortunate that it's not probably going to be a great watch. I probably would want maybe Long and Mate or Mate Zhao. I don't think I'd start Carroll up front for this one, but we'll just have to see what Reading can do. We'll also, let's have a word on Hull, because the podcast will be back after Hull on Saturday, and that is actually a game that Reading, really do need to think, particularly if Reading lose that, they will have lost to a team below them, which will drag them into things, and no matter what happens, that Hull will be below us when we start that game. Absolutely terrible defensive record, Hull. 35 conceded. That's 6 more than the second worst defensive record in the league. So Reading really just need to go, I don't know, do we just go and go hammer and tong at it? Or as ultimately, I suppose, if this is a game that's going to depend on the Watford result, isn't it? If we lose to Watford or lose badly, this turns into a bit of a must-win, doesn't it?
I think Hull does become a must-win because, we're looking at 10 games without a win, or 1 game in 10 games, and that becomes problematic, coming into the break and then coming out of it again, because the mood will be very, very low. And then Coventry, I know we're sort of a month away, but that becomes a must win as well. So the pressure that could be on the team at that point would be massive. Hull again, they've just changed manager. They've obviously got Liam Rossignol in, who will probably do a reasonably good job for those guys, but it's it's very, very difficult to predict what will happen. I think we'll know a little bit more after the Watford game. But certainly with Hull, it's not an easy game either. I know they've been sort of pretty poor in form and they've not been coping particularly well either. But it's, to get any sort of points over the next 2 games would be very welcome. I don't see either of those being wins, to be honest, but we'll have to just see what happens. And kind of hope for the best.
Well, we'll certainly be doing that. Let's do some predictions then to round off the show. None of us predicted a defeat to Preston. Handbags and Ollie said we would draw with Luton, so not a huge amount of change at the top. Ben, you're level with Handbags now on 11 points, so I'll give you the first shot at saying what's going to happen against Watford.
Me saying that it's really hard to predict this season. I've actually done all right with these predictions so far. So I'm quite happy with that.
Well, we've all done badly. You're the best of a bad bunch, don't worry.
Yeah. Watford, I'd take 1-1. I really would. So I'm going to stick that as the prediction. 1-1.
Well, I'm going to go for a 1-0 defeat, being pragmatic. Although I thought I was being pragmatic for Luton and we drew. So there we go. I actually predicted us to lose to Bristol City as well, which didn't go too well. So maybe being pragmatic isn't the way to approach this. It's the Championship at the end of the day. And that's the kind of saving grace, really, isn't it? Is that, Watford just lost to Coventry at home. It's very plausible that Reading can go and win this game against what will obviously be the odds in Reading's or in Watford's favour at least. So we'll have to see. Keep it tuned with the Tilehurst End social media and obviously blog and website to see all our reaction, player ratings and everything from that. Ben, as always, a pleasure to have you on the show. And I think I'm off next week. So as things planned, not to force us on you too publicly, but might be helming the show next week.
Yeah, I can definitely do that. No problem at all. Should be all right, I guess, really, hopefully. Obviously won't do anywhere near as good a job as you do, but I'll give it my best shot. Have a good week, everybody. Let's hope for some points on the road at least. And we'll catch up next weekend.
All right, too kind. Well, I think certainly for Reading this week, it's going to be a case of going away from home and seeing if we can just salvage a bit of momentum and a bit of morale, potentially going into that World Cup break. Let's hope that we go into that with a couple of wins, or at least one win. I think one win away from home this week will be enough to send us into that World Cup break a bit happier, a bit perkier, and looking up rather than down as we go into the December and January slog as we try and catch up after these World Cup break games that we're missing. So we'll be back next week to talk that. And hopefully we'll have some plans as well for some interesting content during the World Cup break. Hopefully won't be going anywhere too soon, too quickly. And as always, come on your arse.
You smile, funny how the crowds always leave a trail, even when it's